So good evening, everybody. We're delighted that you're joining us virtually tonight for our event with Art Bell, author of Constant Comedy, How I Started Comedy Central and Lost My Sense of Humor. And we're also thrilled that he's in conversation with Jim McCue. So Art is a former media executive known for creating, building, and managing successful cable television channels. While working at HBO, he pitched the idea of a 24-hour comedy network, which he helped develop and launch. Art went on to hold senior executive positions in both programming and marketing at Comedy Central. During that time, he also co-authored a humor book entitled Web Sightings, a collection of websites we'd like to see. After leaving Comedy Central, he became president of Court TV, where he was the guiding force behind one of the most successful brand evolutions on cable television. He currently resides in Greenwich and Deer Valley with his wife. A mixture of witty A-list material and his ability to work off script has earned Jim McCue the title Boston's King of Crowd Work. He blends thought-provoking material and uncanny improv skills. He's been featured on Comedy Central, Comedy Cast Spotlight, and Roughing It on NSCN in his native New England. He also founded and currently runs the Boston Comedy Festival. Since 2000, he has also entertained troops at more than 100 bases around the world. An account of his experiences performing for the troops has recently been published in Embedded Comedian, which Jim describes as a field manual for comedians in a war zone. So I'm very pleased to welcome them. Please join me in welcoming them to City Lit virtually tonight, and I'll turn it over to you for our great conversation.
Wow. Teresa, thank you. I hope my parents were watching that. I can very rarely get them to sit down and hear my whole bio read out like that. That was very, I'm gonna have trouble getting my head in the screen. This is a big day for me. I'm so excited to be talking to Art Bell, the author of Constant Comedy. I've been reading this book, and I can tell you, there used to be a big book that every comedian, everyone who had an interest in comedy was reading. It was called Late Night Comedy Wars, and this guy, story like that, it's amazing. It's like the beginning of he started Comedy Central as the comedy channel, and it was his idea, it was in his head. And I'm going to start out just introducing Art Bell, but I've got a chance to talk to Art before on my podcast, and I'm glad you gave me this opportunity, Art.
It's
How's
going
it going?
great, except that, I think you got more bio read than I did, and I'm not sure that that's really fair under the circumstances. I'm the author, and you're the kind of interviewer. But you know what? I'm going to.
Well, you know what I did is I bought some books from Teresa before the interview.
Yeah.
That's how you do it.
You know what? And speaking of that, I'd like to start by thanking Teresa and City Lit Books for hosting this. This is a really important day for me because it's my launch party. And Jim, I just want to explain that, one of the things that kept me going while I was doing the 53rd rewrite of this book at 2 a.m. was the idea that, it was all going to pay off great launch party. I'd have lots of people, my friends, neighbors, family, other people I didn't know, and they'd all be there, and I'd be buying the pizza for them instead of them having to get their own pizza. And we're here. And I'm glad we're here. It's great that we're here. I'm a little disappointed we're not all able to give each other hugs, but thank goodness we're here for my launch party. So this, we're going to talk a lot, but this is really a celebration for me. Because I'm so happy that I got the darn thing done and published.
That is amazing. Just getting it done. I mean,
Yeah,
I think you started out as a network executive. You went to HBO. You went to Comedy Central. Now you get to spend time with Jim McCue in his basement.
Hey, who knew?
It doesn't get better than that.
Listen, one more thing. For those of you who haven't bought the book out there in Zoom land, you really should buy it from Teresa from City Lit Books. She's going to make that possible for you, and especially those of you who live in Chicago, because that's your local independent bookstore, and we have to support our local independent bookstores. And just to make it a little more worthwhile, I think you may have noticed when Teresa mentioned my first book, which I wrote at Comedy Central with 2 other guys, Vinny Favali and Dave Colin, and it's Web Sightings. This is the book. It's not published anymore. You probably can't find it in any store anywhere. Vinny probably has 150 copies himself. I have 6. I'm going to give away 3 of my copies to the first 3 people who buy a book from Teresa tonight, okay? And I know Vinny's out there saying, I want to talk, and he's trying to get on the screen, but you know, it's just me and Jim tonight, Vinny, so you're going to have to hang back. All right, I love those guys too, Vinny and Vinny Fowler, David Cole. Okay, let's get started. What do you want to know, Jim?
Where do I start? I was amazed at kind of a little bit of your history. I mean, you didn't start, you ended up, I mean, first of all, I got some lessons out of this. Like you started out getting a job at HBO, not in the programming department. You weren't in that programming department, but you had this idea and you went in and you pitched the idea, and the first person you pitched it to hated it. Yeah. And how did you get out of that meeting? I wish I met you just for that, so you could, because what you did is you analytically went back and said, these are what she said, so I'm going to learn from that. Where I can tell you as a comedian, when someone tells us we hate their ideas, A, we hate them, and B, we curl up in a ball and drink whiskey for 18 days, which is not the way to solve problems.
I didn't go that route at that point. As a matter of fact, I mean, yes, it's an amazing thing that I pitched this. It wasn't the first person at HBO I mentioned it to, but it was the most senior person. I got my courage up and I said, I'm going to go see Bridget. She's the head of programming at HBO. She's going to love this idea, because why wouldn't she?
Right.
And maybe we can get it going. So I went in there to see her and I told her what it was, and she stopped me halfway through. She said, wait, a 24-hour-a-day comedy channel? Nobody wants to watch comedy for 24 hours a day. What are you, crazy? She said, and what comedian is going to want to go on a 24-hour comedy channel? You're not going to get Whoopi Goldberg on a 24-hour comedy channel. And she went on, and she ended with, and you don't know that much about television. So nice. I didn't even consider whether she was right or wrong. I felt like she threw a lot of ice water on me at that moment, and I did slink out of there a little bit. But as I
but you know what, Art, that was an idea that was like, I remember those days because I used to watch Johnny Carson, and that's where I got my comedy from. Maybe David Letterman at night, and suddenly there was this show, A&E's Evening at the Improv, which seemed like a lot of comedy. And I was like, it seemed, wow, like there's regular people, just, my favorite people, of course, is Jonathan Winters and George Pryor. And you're seeing
they weren't on
guys on Carson.
Right.
You felt like you knew them.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting you mentioned that, because there were only a few places you saw comedy on television. Right. One was they were doing these comedy specials with the bigs. And of course, Johnny Carson. But the third one was A&E at the Improv, which was on, I believe, every night at 7:30. And it was just hanging there like a comedy fog. Right. You know what I mean? And what I noticed was there was no comedy network. HBO had comedy. And one of the things I said to them when I was pitching is like, you're going to relinquish comedy to A&E? I mean, seriously? You're going to let them be known for comedy when you could be? And I think that was one of the things that actually turned them. They said, no, we don't want A&E to be the big comedy.
I like that. And I think that everyone should work that into their pitch when you're pitching something to a TV station, is that fear factor of you don't want someone else to take this. Like, if you don't do this, someone else will.
Oh, let me tell you something. It's a very good point, because one of the things I learned is never underestimate the competition. And certainly in television, people are so competitive. I mean, the whole thing is about ratings, right? They got a bigger audience. We got a bigger audience, right? So competitive. As a matter of fact, when we announced Comedy Channel, we announced it in a big, Michael Fuchs, the head of HBO, big press conference. I'm like, Michael, we don't know if this is going to work. So not a big, maybe put a classified ad out that we're going to, no, he's got a big press conference, right? And the day after the press conference, MTV Networks put out a press release saying, oh yeah, we're going to launch a comedy network too. So you know what was going on over there. It's like, did you see these guys are launching a comedy network? We're going to let them do it.
Right.
And so 6 months after we launched our comedy channel, they launched theirs.
Now, was MTV doing the MTV half hour at that time yet?
Well, you got me.
I don't know either, but I know that maybe that was the way
Yeah.
they dipped their toe in it. But another thing that I learned from your book was you kind of, I know that you were working with HBO and they're trying to do this other network, and you really knew what the people around the country were craving because you're interviewing them, you're surveying them, and you were learning that you kept saying, "Hey, do you like? Yeah, I would love to watch a comedy
Yeah,
channel."
that was one of the things I was doing was researching. I was in a department called New Business Development, and they had developed a new paid channel called Festival. It was going to be a paid channel like HBO, but no sex, violence, or bad language. Funny story. I walked in the first day of my job. I said, "This will never work." I said, "Who's going to watch a television?"
That's the only reason anyone got HBO.
Most people were watching it but HBO was convinced that the reason people weren't watching HBO or subscribing to HBO was based on their research was that they didn't want that kind of stuff in their home. So they had me go around the country and talk to people about how they use television. Yeah, I snuck in my little idea
Sure.
on every interview saying, what do you think about comedy? I love comedy, So by the time I actually was pitching it, I had a little bit of that ammunition to go along with the situation. Yeah, it was cool.
And then, so now I'm going to jump ahead a little bit back again because this is one of the fascinating things that, like, if you are a comedy fan or you're a comedian, you want to read this book because this is crazy and kind of cool that the Ha Network from MTV and HBO's Comedy Channel, within days of each other, pops off a modern day comedy war. Like, you guys are now, who's going to be the dominant comedy force in both launching, like, both of you are going to learn together blindly how to create a 24-hour comedy channel, get it up on its legs, and defeat another Goliath.
It was crazy. It was really crazy. It was called the Comedy Wars, and we were both trying to get distributed across the country. And the cable operators, the guys who would be putting it on their cable systems, they didn't want two comedy channels because they didn't have a whole lot of channels to go around. Now they got with digital, they got 500 channels. But in those days, they'd have like 50 channels. They said, we can't have two of these things. And so they hated that. And we were going head to head. And I thought the Comedy Channel was winning. We had a little better ratings and better reviews. And I thought, man, we're going to do this, And just at the point where I knew we were going to prevail, they announced that they were merging the two channels.
How did that happen?
One of the reasons was the head guy in cable, the guy who was really the godfather of cable, and owned like most of the cable systems in the country, said, I want peace in the valley. I want one channel. I don't want two. And everybody's like, oh. So then they said, okay, so we merged the channels. They fired a bunch of people. They left me and my opposite number in programming from the other channel. They put us in the room. I didn't know the guy, and he didn't know me. I mean, I'd heard his name.
Awkward.
No, awkward for sure. And they said, you guys, figure it out. Figure out what you got, hire some people from both sides, and put together a comedy network, And
that's like that scene from The Godfather where they take the two families and they go, this war is bad for business.
Exactly what
nobody's making any money.
so much of this was inspired by the mafia. But anyway, so we had to figure out, after having launched comedy and been killing ourselves on it for a year, they said, okay, stop. Start again, launch a new channel. You got some programming, figure out what to call it, what it's going to be and everything. And I was a little concerned because, we were two different kinds of channels and two different cultures. MTV.
How are you different?
Well, I think that MTV had come out of Nickelodeon and Nick at Night, and they were really kind of focused on classic sitcoms. That was a real focus of theirs. Our focus was more on stand-up comedy and classic comedy, and we had MST3000 at that point. So we were going a little weirder, I guess, a little edgy, Anyway, the good news is we got it together. you know,
Yeah.
together. And we started Comedy Central. And I almost think it was more of an achievement to get that thing going after, you know, after not knowing these people and putting those two cultures together and making it work. It was more of an achievement than launching the thing in the first place. So.
What's the craziest pitch you remember getting when you were in programming at Comedy Central? Or is there a couple?
Well,
is that a bad thing? Like somebody out there is going to.
No. There's an answer to that.
Yeah.
There was the craziest pitch I ever got. And it was from Bobcat Goldthwait.
Oh, that makes sense.
He was about I thought he was like the funniest guy in the world.
Absolutely.
Anyway. I never met the guy who comes in. Now, here's the bad part. I, honest to God, cannot remember what he was pitching because I was laughing so hard throughout the whole thing. And whatever it was, we didn't buy it because it was probably something completely crazy.
Right.
I could not stop laughing. And I walked out of there laughing. I think I was laughing for 2 days.
Wow.
No idea what he was pitching.
Wow. That's great.
Yeah, it's cool. Yeah.
Cool. And, you know, I think I owe you, probably I should thank you because I did a show, Stand Up. Was that one of your shows?
Yeah, that was one.
Well, thank you for that.
We did a lot of stand-up on the channel. We put a lot of stand-up comedians through the channel. As a matter of fact, at the time, I don't know if you experienced this, it was kind of a little edgy joke among the comedians, especially the younger ones, like, oh yeah, Comedy Central is running my clip, you know, a clip of my act, and they run it every 20 minutes, bring out my act.
Yes.
While I'm standing here talking. Did you hear that? Did you ever hear that?
I did. Well, I don't know if you know, there's a comedian, Patrice O'Neill, who's known, he passed away a couple years ago, but insanely funny guy. But when he was in Boston, he would call me and torture me because that clip would come on, and we didn't have enough money. We had 5 comedians. We didn't have cable TV. He goes, Jimmy, what'd you pay these guys? You're on Comedy Central again. And another thing is, my parents didn't get Comedy Central on their cable, whatever they couldn't find it. So like that moment where your parents are going to see you, they're like, I don't know what you're talking about, you know. But I got calls from Patrice O'Neill like 6 or 8 times. He would call me, you know.
Sometimes you don't want your parents to see everything you do.
Yeah, well, in hindsight, it really was a blessing. They didn't see it. Yeah. I wish I could get all my old comedy back. You know, like.
Well, we did burn out a lot of young comedy clips, but you got to remember we weren't very distributed. So while it looked like we were playing it a lot, it was not that exposed. And as we grew, we got more programming in. I know
at the time, some of the older comedians, the guys that were ahead of us, were very threatened by cable TV comedy. They thought it was going to ruin, you know, the comedy industry. And of course, it always morphs and mutates and gets better and different and more creative. And then the next thing now is the internet's going to destroy comedy, but we don't see that at all. It just keeps. I mean, how do you see the change from, you know, cable was like the Wild West, and you were like, you know, right in there in Deadwood when
I was Deputy Dog.
Right. But now, like, so how do you see that changing into?
Well, it's interesting. Actually, I guess that's the first time I heard that the comedians were really threatened by it, because one of the things,
they were afraid it was going to, like, guys would build a 45-minute act, and they could work for 20 years once they got that.
Right.
Now they're on TV. People know their act. Well, guess what? You got to go back. You got to write more.
Yeah, no kidding.
Which is work. You know.
Right. Well,
I don't know.
At the time, and you may remember this, comedy clubs were kind of exploding. That was, you know,
yes.
in the 80s, beginning of the 90s. And as you pointed out, there wasn't that much comedy on television.
Right.
So when we put this together, one of my hopes and dreams for the channel, and I used to say this, was that it would kind of be a place for comedians to hang out.
Yeah.
Because before, where'd you hang out? You hung out at clubs or?
Right.
Know, right.
Well, I have, you know, the guys like me, that's a TV credit, suddenly you moved up in the club.
Yeah, right.
It kind of broke that.
Right.
You know, there was guys that, you know, if you've been doing comedy for 4 years or 5 years, they've been doing it for 10. You've been doing it for 10, they were doing it for 20. And now suddenly you had a credit, so you could draw a little bit. I saw that guy in Comedy Central.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, so that did, I mean, so
that was it. That was very, very important to me, that the comedy industry would embrace us. And I think they did. Again, a little tentative at first, but I think they did. And the other thing I wanted for Comedy Channel and Comedy Central was to do innovative comedy that nobody else would do. And I think early on, after launching Comedy Channel, two things happened. One, comedians started hanging out. I said, okay, that's a good thing. And two, MST 3000 shows up, which was, the craziest show we ever saw.
Yeah.
And it came in the mail, by the way. And I said, you know what? This channel is going to attract innovative comedy because nobody's going to put that kind of stuff on. NBC, CBS, they wouldn't do it.
No.
HBO wouldn't do it. So
I give you so much credit for being so open to look. Like you're opening your mail and looking at stuff. Like somebody walked in and said, "Hey, have you seen this tape? It's guys making fun of a movie while it's running."
Yeah, actually, the story is better than that.
Okay.
We were trying to make that show because the head writer, a guy named Eddie Gorodetsky, said, "We got to make a show that's about us washing something else and making fun of it, like television or movies." And we said, "Yeah, great idea, Eddie." And so literally 3 days later, some guy walks in with a tape. He says, "Got to see this." And there's the show.
Wow.
So we told Eddie to put that other thing on hold. We flew out to Minneapolis. These guys were doing it at an independent television station in Minneapolis. And you may remember that MST 3000, which lives on as what's it called? Rift Tracks. Anyway, they were doing it at this independent channel. And when they came to us, they wanted to do the kinds of movies they were doing. They would take The Godfather off the shelf. And they would do The Godfather, which was completely illegal. They could have been.
Not to mention real gangsters will show up and kill you.
And we said, guys, we can't do real movies. So that's why we started doing, bad monster pictures that nobody owned anymore, and that's how that started. Anyway, that was the MST story.
I've been reading this book and I love it. I was wondering if you could pick one of a part of the book you like and maybe read it to us. Would you be willing to do that, or is that?
Would everybody like that? I can't hear you. Okay.
A reading from the book of Artemis or Arthur.
Okay. Let me just, Teresa, that's nice, Teresa. Okay, I'll read a part of the book. I'll read a part. Okay.
I want to read along on constant content. Okay. So what page do I go to?
12. No, don't read along.
Okay, I won't read along. Okay.
Okay. That's him, Mitch said it. And we started walking to the car where Mitch introduced me to Bill Maher. Hi, Bill. We met before when you were sitting in for Jon Stewart on Short Attention Span Theater a couple months ago. Oh, yeah, that's right. I remember you. I suspected he didn't, but he clapped me on the shoulder as if we were old pals. You guys want to get some breakfast? I passed a diner on the way here. Sure, but can we all fit? Mitch asked, eyeing Bill's tiny sports car. What are you talking about? Bill replied. There's plenty of room. Art, you mind riding in the back? Mitch needs the front seat. I bent down and looked into the car. The back was, in fact, the back and not a back seat. Mitch was a good 6 inches taller than me. The back seat might cripple me, but it would kill him for sure. Yeah, no problem. I took off my jacket and handed it to Mitch, then pushed the passenger seat forward and climbed in. Pulled myself in and turned over so that I was lying on my back with my knees up and my shoes placed just below the rear window. I'm good, I said, but I can't find the seat. Laughed and Bill gave a little snort. I'll drive carefully, Bill said, but if there's a horrific fiery crash, you're toast. Send me, I said. Bill and Mitch climbed in and put on their seatbelts, and we pulled away from the curb, leaving the kids. Mitch turned in his seat to look at me. You okay back there, Art? Yeah, I'm fine. I just hope this diner is worth it. It's breakfast, Bill said. What could possibly go wrong? A couple eggs, some bacon, a stack of pancakes with fake maple syrup, and a wise-ass gum-snapping waitress as old as my mother with a face like my father. The car easily to the left and screeched to a stop. Mitch opened his door and gave me a hand getting out. I looked up on the giant sign, Bright Stars Diner. It was one of those big placards under it that read, Welcome National Cable Television Conference. Give me a second while I uncrumple myself, I said, brushing dust off my suit. Bill took charge as soon as we walked in the door. 3 for breakfast, he said to the guy sitting at the cash register, who in turn told us to sit anywhere we liked. Then Bill pointed to a pretty blonde waitress and asked, "That waitress, which table is she working? She seems nice." The cash register guy looked over and gestured to a booth by the bathroom. "That's perfect," Bill said. And we walked over and sat down. Mitch and me on one side, Bill on the other. The waitress was there in an instant. "Hi, boys." She looked at Mitch. "Hey, are you Jerry Seinfeld?" Mitch sighed. "At this point, I might as well be, but no, I'm not." "His name's Mitch, this is Art, and I'm Bill. I'm a comedian, if that helps." She looked at Bill. "Why would that help?" She passed out the giant diner menus. "Everyone want coffee?" After we ordered, Mitch set up the conversation. "Okay, Bill, you've been working on a talk show idea and your timing is good. Art and I have been looking for some kind of talk show." Bill straightened up and ran both hands through his dirty blonde shoulder-length hair, moving some stray locks back behind his ears. "You know what's wrong with talk shows? They're boring," I said, and I immediately regretted it. Bill glanced at me and continued without acknowledging my response. I shifted uncomfortably in the booth and waited. "The trouble with talk shows," Bill continued, "is that nobody talks. I mean, the hosts talk, the guests talk, their lips move, and sound comes out. But what are they talking about? Anything important? No. Usually the guests are just there to hype their new movie or book. And who cares what they have to say? The guests are mostly celebrities without a clue. I want to do a talk show where the people actually talk." He stopped for emphasis, but I wasn't sure yet what he was emphasizing. "You know, about the issues. And I'm going to tell it like it is. No pulling my punches, no pussyfooting around the guest. No playing to their egos, no stroking them so they just sit there and beam at the audience. We'll have real conversations about real issues. And I'm going to get nasty when I have to. Call out the hypocrisy. Nail the bullshitters. The show's called Politically Incorrect, and that's what it'll be." "I think I got it," Mitch said. "Question, where's the funny?" "I'm the funny, but I won't compete with my guests. I won't dive in with a joke at every opportunity just to get a laugh. I want the audience to get something out of this other than just me being funny." "Are all the guests comics?" I asked. "You put 5 comics on a panel on TV, and they all talk at the same time. You can't hear a thing. Preschoolers would do better." "Yeah, good point," Bill said, "but I'm not going to let that happen. Of course, we'll have comics on, but we'll talk about real stuff. And not all the guests will be comics. I want interesting people who can hold up their end of the conversation. Politicians, novelists, futurists, tattoo artists." Our breakfast arrived and Bill kept talking for another 20 minutes, answering our question. When he excused himself to go to the men's room, I looked at Mitch. "What do you think?" "He's smart and he's funny. I think he can pull it off." "I do too," I said. "But we'll have to start with a small order, maybe 2 months worth of shows. We don't have much of a budget." Mitch nodded. "I never bought a show this fast. You think we're making a mistake?" "No," I said, "it feels right. And how long have we been saying we need a show like this?" Bill came back and sat down. We told him we'd like to do the show and he smiled. "I knew you would. You don't have a lot of good programs on that channel of yours, but this is a start." He looked around for the waitress. "Check." Mitch and I had only been working together for 3 weeks, but in that diner, we made our first programming decision together. The show wasn't another comedian talk fest, and Bill seemed capable of striking the right tone. And, bonus, Bill seemed like a guy who would be easy to work with. At least he and I had an easy rapport. Maybe we'd become friends.
And did you become friends?
No, not even close. What's the opposite of friends? Enemies. That's the one. You got to read the book. It's a great story, and we didn't become friends.
Okay.
Actually, I don't think a lot of people became friends with Bill. He was not necessarily friend-inducing,
Right.
I guess.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll leave that alone.
Okay. Thanks. Both are correct.
You had a story in there that touched a nerve with me. You had someone, one of the big executives, his wife called because they want to do a surprise party.
Oh.
And this, as a comedian, this is so close to my heart because people call me like this too. And then they go, "I understand you play jazz piano." You tell us. I don't know. For me, it was like, I get that, man.
It's in the book, so I don't want to give too much.
All right, I won't give it too much away, but like,
no.
I'll just say as a comedian, people are like, "Hey, we're at a kid's party. Why don't you get up and do some comedy?" And you're like, "What?"
So yeah, so
there's a lot of great stories in this book.
Thanks, Jim. my boss's, I'll just set it up for you. My boss's boss called me because she knew I played piano because I had told my boss. And I played classical most of my life. My mother's classical piano teacher. So of course I had to play piano. But anyway, I played classical piano. When I got to New York, I wanted to take some jazz. So I took some jazz and I was starting to learn how to play it. And she calls up and she says, "Hi, Art, I understand, you know how to play jazz piano." I said, "Well, I just started. I really don't know." She says, "We're having a party. It's a surprise party for my husband. And I'd like you to come and play some jazz." I said, "Well, look, I really can't see you there." And that was it. She
Trapped.
hung up. And shenanigans ensued. Let me just say, I did go to the party, but
Oh,
it was a moment in my life that I'd rather not relive too many times, but it is in the book.
all right. So this is a great book. I love this book, and there's a lot of because you come at comedy in so many different angles. I mean, you're a lover of comedy, but you've also worn so many different hats.
Yeah, you know what? And that
One of them, but also, I mean, a lot: marketing and editing and promotions and
didn't work out so much in my favor in the early days.
yeah. But
Because I was thrown in when we started the Comedy Channel. I was teamed up with a lot of guys who knew the comedy business. They knew a lot about the comedy business. And what they said to me all the time was, "What do you know about comedy?"
right,
Because I didn't know anything about comedy. I knew what I liked, and I
right.
knew I loved comedy, but I didn't really know the business. And they were not all that pleased about that. So I had to sort of learn all by myself. I had no friends at work. No, that's not true. But they rightly said that. And the other thing that one of the guys always said, one of the comedy guys always said, he says, "Hey, there's the guy with the big idea," because I think he was like, he's saying we're killing ourselves trying to put this together because of that guy.
Right. I love the fact that you are, and not going to get a lot of the credit in this book, but you are absolutely the first guy fired. If this doesn't work, you're absolutely the guy with the head in the noose.
Yeah, that's true. I was on the line. I was on the line, and at all times. And for the first year especially, I thought they were going to just shut down the channel. It was doing so badly that the head of HBO was embarrassed. He was really embarrassed after he'd made this huge announcement. And actually, that's where the subtitle of my book comes from.
And success has many fathers, but failure is
Is mine.
his
Is mine.
fault.
Yeah.
Right?
So
Right.
anyway, the book's called Constant Comedy: How I Started Comedy Central and Lost My Sense of Humor. And people ask me about, what's with that subtitle?
Right.
The subtitle came because about 6 months into the channel, when Michael was embarrassed, he was very embarrassed about it. He called us in and he sat a few of us down and he didn't say anything for about 30 seconds while sweat was running down my back. And then finally he said, "It took a comedy channel to make me lose my sense of humor."
Oh, no.
And I said, "Oh boy." And I looked around and nobody was laughing.
Right.
And I realized at that moment, we'd all lost our sense of humor. So, it was tough. And I wanted to convey the fact that it was tough. It was very tough.
Yeah.
Very tough.
Wow. All right. Well, I think people at this juncture, people should buy. How do they buy the book? How do they get the book?
Well, there's lots of ways to buy the book. You can buy it from Teresa at City Lit.
Yes, Teresa. Thank you.
And you can go to Amazon or any of your other online things and get it there. And if you want to learn more about me, you can go to artbellwriter.com.
Do we have time for one more question?
I think we have time. We got plenty of time, right, Teresa?
Are we okay? Yeah, because I want to ask you. You had an executive that looked just like Jerry Seinfeld.
Oh yeah, I mentioned that in the story.
Yeah.
Yeah, you really couldn't make this stuff up. Let me just get a picture of him up here.
I think it's hysterical. But anyway, I'll let you tell the story.
Can you see that? Can everybody see that?
Wow.
That's Mitch Semmel, the guy I was talking about in the story. He looked exactly like Jerry Seinfeld at the time. So, if I had written a novel and I put that in, people would say, "What, are you crazy?" That would never happen, but it happened. And it made for some for some pretty crazy.
Now, did he also dress exactly like him? Because that could be part of his problem. He could
That,
have grown
that,
a beard.
that picture was done by Variety. I believe that picture was done by Variety.
Okay.
Because it got around the industry so much. So anyway, just, one other thing I want to talk about in writing this book was that was interesting to me. A couple of things, actually. One was writing about real people, which is a challenge because you want to sort of capture the essence of the person. It's kind of like sketching, You want to capture the essence of the person in a few strokes. You don't want to tell 2 pages of biography and describe what they look like and what they wore all the time and all that. You just want to do it in a few strokes. And I found it was very difficult, but I hope I got the hang of it because, so many great people worked on this channel and they're in the book. A lot of them are in the book. Not everybody was in the book, but a lot of them are in the book. And that was important to me. The other thing was just by writing this book, I got to hear from so many people from the old days. And that was really great. It was really just so nice to hear from all those people. So it was a good time.
It's an awesome book. I mean, I really I enjoy it, and I think, like, I keep saying the same thing over and over again, but I think I'm going to recommend this to all my comedian friends, street, and anybody who has an interest in comedy. I mean, this is it's a crazy time in the history of comedy when you have a guy that invents the Comedy Channel, and then the Ha Network, and then somehow you rode this crazy wave.
I did.
And there wasn't a lot of people that made that wave, where both of them are combined after a war, and then and all this crazy creativity of comedy that came together, and under pressure cooker, which most of the times that's when it does come.
That's true. It was an adventure. I mean, that's why I wanted to write about it. It was an adventure. Hey, Jim, we got any questions from the audience?
Yeah, let's see what we got.
Anybody type in a question.
Was it hard to be candid about former colleagues and friends continue to have friendships with in a business?
Actually,
from Bob.
It was a little bit challenging, especially because, as I said, you wanted to capture the essence of the person and you wanted them to be well represented in the book. And one of the things I thought about was, man, what are my work there going to say when they read this? And these are real people, and I certainly didn't want to lose any friends over it.
Right.
So I was holding my breath a little bit after the book was published, and they, I know that they're pleased with what I was talking about, what I was saying. So that was good. Yeah, good question.
Okay, we got a question from Douglas Lee. Have you heard from Bridget who kiboshed the idea?
I haven't heard from Bridget in several years. And let me just tell you something. It was funny because Bridget, yeah, she killed the idea instantly. But there was a second meeting that Michael held with all the executives of HBO. And she was in the meeting. And Michael turned to her after I had done my presentation. And he said, Bridget, what do you think? And she said, I love it.
That's a great show business story.
Well, I'm sure it's been repeated a million times in a million different places.
Sure.
But, listen, a lot of people don't see the wisdom of doing something that turns out, there's stories about people who passed on the Gone with the Wind script, or the Godfather script, or Chinatown got shopped around. Those guys always say, yeah, that guy passed on it.
And you went on to be the guy on the other side of the coin where people are coming in and pitching you ideas.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, that's
and you
true.
didn't take every idea that came over your desk.
No, as a matter of fact, the only one we took was Bill Maher's. No, that's not true. We did a lot of stuff. It was, you get sensitive to the fact that, when you turn down somebody, it's really hard for them to hear. So I tried not to be brutal about it, but sometimes I was brutal.
Well, I mean, it's hard to say no, You
got another question there?
Let's see. What did you miss about Comedy Central after leaving?
having a job. That was the first thing I missed because, you know, mortgage, wife, kids, the whole thing. No, seriously, it was very hard for me to leave because I took the channel so personally. I mean, I really did internalize. It was really my thing. And
Yeah.
I wanted it to be successful. And I felt I had shepherded it through so much, so many near misses with disaster. Um, and it was at the point where, you know, we were just starting to do the Daily Show, and we were really kind of, everybody acknowledged that we were successful and things were starting to go pretty well, and we were making some money. And then, you know, I got fired. They brought in new management, fired the old management, and there you go. So
You ever take a moment and just think of what a miracle it was that you came up with this idea and when there was no comedy 24-hour channels and
well, you
you
know,
got it done.
you got to remember something. I was flabbergasted at the time I pitched it that nobody had done it already. I
Right.
kept saying that. I kept waiting for somebody to like announce. So for me, it was the most obvious thing in the world. For everybody else, they thought it was kind of a zany idea. I don't know. I still don't get it.
Yeah, but you were the emperor has no clothes guy. You were nobody was turning around going, "Hey, you know, this guy's got, you know, you had to believe in it. And you had to, you know,
Well, yeah, it took a lot of passion.
recalibrate it." And you got a moment in the book where you talk about where someone dragged you up to that big office and
Yeah.
you got the spotlight put right on you and you had to, you know, grab your socks and make your pitch, you know. I mean,
Yeah.
that's kind of a miracle.
Well, my whole life is a miracle when you come right down to it.
Yeah.
Look at Christy on this question.
Here's a question. Is it true that you and Stu Smiley had become BFFs?
I just want to know who asked that question. Was it Stu?
It's CL and I'm sorry, CL. CNL and Adam. Am I pronouncing that right?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Is that sarcasm?
No, it's not true. But the interesting story there. Stu and I didn't see eye to eye on a lot of things at the channel when we were working together. In the first year, he had been the head of comedy programming at HBO, and then they pulled him out of that job, and they made him the head of programming, original programming at the Comedy Channel. And I don't think he liked that too much. You know, I think he was having a pretty good time at his old job. You know,
Right.
and so right off the bat, he was a little edgy about the whole thing. And he was one of the guys who said, you know, what do you know about comedy? So we didn't see eye to eye on things, and actually we fought quite a bit. So the fact that that question came up from somebody who probably knows we didn't become best friends doesn't surprise me. But I will say this, I have seen Stu since, and we are not enemies. We're not,
Right.
as a matter of fact, I will tell you a story. Stu, when I told Stu that I'd written the book, because I told everybody in the book they were.
Sure.
He said, "Oh man, that's going to be ugly, huh?" And I said, "No, Stu, it's not. You know, I really didn't do that. The purpose of the book was not to, you know, rip people apart or even portray them badly. I described what people did mostly, you know, what they did, but not, you know, whether I liked them or didn't like them or we had a fight or something. You know, that was it."
I got another question. Can you name a comedian or some comedians that really made it big since your early days? That maybe when you first met them, they were not big.
I think the best example of that is Jon Stewart. I mean,
Right.
Jon Stewart was on the channel, was on Comedy Channel from day one. He was host of a show called Short Attention Span Theater, which, by the way, I think is the all-time show ever. I wish they'd bring it back. They could do whatever they want on the show. It's so cool. Anyway, he was host of that. And I remember watching him for the first time on Short Attention Span Theater and thinking, man, this guy is so funny, but he's also smart. You know, he's also got a real point of view, and he's got a lot of humanity. I mean, all that stuff came on, you know, was radiating from him almost from the start. And it was amazing. So what wasn't amazing was that he became infinitely successful because he deserved it. He was really good.
I got the chance to meet him once, and it's horrible because he's just a really nice guy too. There's nothing to dislike about him.
No, it's hard to know. Here's a story about Jon Stewart, which is not in the book. Years after I left the Comedy Central, And Jon Stewart at that time was doing the Daily Show, right?
Yeah.
And I hadn't spent time talking to him. So we go to breakfast with my brother and his family, and I got my family, my kids there. And Jon Stewart walks up. He had been, eating in this restaurant, having brunch. And he was like, hat pulled down low, 2-day
Yep.
growth, didn't look like Jon Stewart, but I knew it was Jon. So I went up to him quietly and I said, "Hey, Jon, I don't want to make a big deal about this, but I saw you here and I'd just like to say hello." And he goes, "Art, how are you?" He gives me the big hello and everything. And he's glad to see me. "What are you up to? What are you doing?" I said, "No." And then I introduced him to my family. And I said, "Hey, this is my friend Jon. This is
Nice.
my family." And I'm introducing him, right? And my family's nodding like, "Where's breakfast?" And they sat down. We sat down, had breakfast. Jon came over before he left and said goodbye. "Great to see you." Nobody said anything about it. And then about an hour later, after we left the restaurant, I said, "Hey, so what'd you think of meeting Jon Stewart?" And they went, "That was Jon Stewart? Why didn't you tell us that was Jon Stewart? How do you know Jon Stewart?" They were so angry at me. They didn't talk to me for about 6 months.
Yeah, but he thought they were being incredibly cool.
Yeah, right.
Right?
Yes.
Where they would have been all over him.
Yeah. Well, I was thankful they weren't all over him, basically. But anyway, that was a pretty funny story. All right, we got another question out there.
Yep.
Christiani had a question, I think.
There's a few actually. There's, are you able to tell us without getting sued, who was one of your favorite old Borscht Belt comedians King got in a fight with?
No.
No.
No,
Okay.
because you know what? No. And I kept that out of the book, and I'd like to keep that out because the guy is still alive. Alan's not, but the guy is still alive, and he'd probably come and have a fight with me. So
Okay.
I'm leaving that out. Good question, though. We
Good
can
question.
talk privately
Nice try.
in years to come.
The question was from Dewey Cheatham and Howe. Wanted to ask you that question.
A lawyer.
Looking for work.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I tried to protect some of that stuff. And Alan, I loved Alan King, and the book opens with me having a conversation with him. And he told me some stories that I thought, he was telling me kind of confidentially.
Right.
He didn't say, "Hey, don't tell anybody."
Just a couple guys talking though.
We were having a conversation. I didn't want to just, blow his whole thing.
Is there any stories you wish you could have put in the book, but you didn't make it? And
Well, there's one story about Comedy Central. It's not really a story, but it's a thing that I didn't put in the book because I didn't get it really verified. But, when they threw us together and said, make a new channel, we started Comedy Central and we started working and we started putting this stuff together. And, we didn't know if it was going to work or anything, but we were hell bent on making it successful. I was not going to let that thing fail. And the other people felt the same way. But it turns out there was a rumor that the board, the people on the board, didn't think the channel was going to make it through the year. They just wrote, we'll check in a couple of months, see if they're still kicking, because
don't buy them any new furniture.
I think they figured that we're going to merge the channels, then we don't have to think about them anymore. Maybe the whole thing will go away.
We'll kill them both at once.
Yeah, exactly. But I didn't put that in the book because, it was a little bit of a rumor that I heard later. Yeah. And I did listen. There were so many crazy things that happened at that channel. And part of writing a book is trying to decide what to put in and what to leave out. There were actually other stories I left out about my childhood, which I put a few things in about my childhood that I thought kind of gave some insight into what I was doing at comedy or, meshed with the story at the time.
You also gave context to kind of what you're saying about you. We got to see a little bit more of where you're coming from.
I mean, it's a memoir, and actually one of my writing teachers said they really have to know art to appreciate the book.
Right.
You can't hide your background.
It does. It gives a feeling like you kind of know a little bit of why when you're in that big office you feel the way you feel. You kind of describe the way you're dressed and other people are dressed.
Right.
And you have the talent and the business side and the attitudes and you have a great story about the I'm not going to give it all away, but the corporate cafeteria at HBO.
Oh yeah.
Was like high school, and I identified with that. There was different tables, and you don't you know which table you're supposed to go to, you know?
Hey, so much about life is like high school, don't you think?
Unfortunately, you think when you get out of high school, it's all gonna get better. It's just never.
I'm still trying to date a cheerleader, you know, and I know it's never
Right.
going to happen. That's not
They're
true.
all with Bill Maher, my friend. They're all with Bill Maher.
It is not true.
He is winning the
I
cheerleader
want to know.
competition.
You know who my cheerleader is? I am dating a cheerleader. This is my wife.
Okay.
Okay.
You know, everyone's asking about you. You're very popular.
Yeah, I'm
We've
popular.
gotten like 6 questions. Where is Carrie? Where is
Harry's right here.
Carrie?
Harry's been sitting here going, you know. All right, and listen, I want to be sensitive. Any more questions out there that we should be answering before we shut this baby down?
Who was your first choice to play you in the Netflix miniseries?
Oh, that's a good question. Jim, actually, it was you. You know, we haven't known each other for that long. Jim and I met cute on Zoom when he interviewed me, and so we're Zoom friends. But I really, you know, think that your attitude and my attitude are, you know,
Absolutely.
the same. The problem may be that you got about 12 inches on me, I think, if not 14.
I'm 6'6", which,
Yeah.
by the way, when you talk about getting in the back of Bill Maher's car, was very tactile for me.
Yeah,
You
right.
know, I don't mind getting in the back seat, and you're like, ah.
Right. Okay, I think we have, Teresa wants us out of here by 8:30. I guess
Okay.
she's got to clean the place up because everybody made a mess. We made a mess. So let's just get another question or two, and then we'll say goodbye. Anything out there?
What about the Stephen Colbert question?
Oh, yes, I apologize. Did you ever work with Stephen Colbert? And if yes, is he a nice guy?
The answer to the first question is no. I never did have the pleasure of working with Stephen Colbert, and I wish I had. But he came after me. He came after I left. As to whether he's a nice guy, you know, I've heard it both ways. Is all I can say. You know, you hear, you know, you hear a lot of things about talent like that, and I think when he got to CBS, I think he was nervous, and I think the first few months he wasn't such a nice guy, but now, you know, then the show became successful, so hopefully things smoothed out. But that's all I got about. I don't know the guy. I honestly don't know him. So
Right.
Let me say I hope he's a nice guy.
Yeah.
Any other questions or? All right.
There is a question about your writing process and just what it was like to, you know, just change totally what you're doing and write a book, that process. How was that for you?
Well, I didn't start out to write a book. Actually, I did. I was going to write a book about being an amateur musician and how frustrating that was because I played piano and I played jazz piano and I wasn't that great, but, you know, it was frustrating. I tried. And there were all these prodigies around, you know, who could do anything when they were 6 years old. And it really, you know, it drove me crazy. So I was going to write that book. And I started to write that book. And then I met a guy at a party and I was telling him about it. He goes, yeah, that book's been written maybe 1,000 times by 1,000 other people. I said, well, thank you for that. But I continued a little bit. And then one day in writing class, I guess, I read a story. I went to some writing classes at Sarah Lawrence Writing Institute. Shout out to Sarah Lawrence. And I read a story that I'd written about comedy and Comedy Central. And everybody kind of like came out of their stupor, you know, in their class and went, wow, we didn't know you did that. That was good. And it hurt me because I had written maybe 150,000 words about my childhood and playing the piano and everything else. And finally, they liked that. So I said, okay, all right, so I'll write a few more stories. And really, that was my intention, just to write more stories. I found the process of writing to be fun. I know that a lot of people who write, especially for a living, I didn't have to make a living at that point, but say that writing is hard. And yeah, it's hard. It's hard to sit yourself down and start writing. But I delighted myself when I'd write something and then read it again and say, hey, that's good. So I really got a kick out of it. My writing process, I did take some courses, and then I got into writing groups where I had friends who were writers. We could read our stuff to, and they would, you know, criticize it, and then we could rewrite it. So that was very helpful. And mostly I would write in the late afternoon. I know that's kind of weird, but like 3 o'clock on was my chief writing time. for some reason. Good question. Anything else out there?
There's another question about what's next.
What's next for Art Bell?
Yeah.
My wife just asked me that, actually. I would like to continue writing. I'd like to write a novel. I've been writing short stories, and I find that very gratifying. It's also very freeing to write fiction because you don't have to follow the actual story that happened to any extent, which I certainly tried to do in my memoirs, and I hope I did successfully. But in fiction, anything can happen and probably will, and you can make up the dialogue and make up how characters do things, and I'm just having a fun time with that. I will say that a novel, which is, like 70 to 90,000 words, roughly, and I've written short stories that are maybe 5,000 words at the longest. So a novel sounds like, a bridge too far, but it's out there for me. I'm probably going to try.
Frank Quinn wants to know, did your coverage of the 1996 campaign lead to the defeat of Bob Dole? Do they have to read the book to find out?
I have no idea. I have no idea. It's a hell of a good question, though. Listen, I know Teresa wanted us vamoosed by 8:30. I don't want to.
I'm good if there are more questions, Jim, you think would be good to ask. We can go for a few more minutes if that works.
Oh, thanks, Teresa.
Sure.
Anything out there?
Did you mention? Okay, I don't know if we want to ask that one.
Go ahead.
Okay. Well, there's a question about Tommy's Topless. I don't know if you want to get into that one. Tommy's Topless on 14th Street was so much cooler. I don't know.
I will say that read the book, okay?
Okay,
and then,
all right.
Then you'll find out why that question makes sense. But
okay.
It's a chapter I don't actually articulate in front of people. I did write it though. Okay, good.
That's what we call a cliffhanger. I'm buying I got the book.
All right.
Okay.
All right, listen, I'd like to thank everybody for coming. This was my celebration for launching the book, and I'm really grateful for all turning out to see Jim and I chat about the book. I hope you like it when you read it. I hope you buy it if you haven't. And if you don't buy it, that's okay too. But I would also like to thank City Lit Books and Teresa once again for hosting this. It was really fun. It was really great. And I can't thank her enough. So please support her and the other independent bookstores in this country.
Thanks so much. Here's the book. Art, we did hit 100, just so you know, 100.
World record.
Views. So
Wait a
that's
second.
awesome. All the promotion of this event worked and everyone wanted to see you tonight. That was just great. Thanks.
That was great. I forgot to thank the other important person in this, and that's Jim McCue. As I said, we're Zoom friends, but he consented to do this for me, and I can't thank him enough. He made it.
Thank you. I'd always thank you for letting me be part of it. I'm honored.
And listen, I think it was mentioned that Jim is the founder of the Boston Comedy Festival. And Jim, is that coming up, or what are you going to do with it?
November, we're going virtual. So yeah, bostoncomedyfestival.com. Thanks for mentioning that.
Yeah. So wherever you live now, you don't have to live in Boston to go to the Boston Comedy Festival. And Jim will be in charge. So take that as a good thing or a bad thing based on what you saw tonight.
We'll have a chowder party.
I know I'm going to be there virtually. All right, listen, thanks very much. Thanks very much for coming. Listen, and, safe home.
Don't forget to tip your waitresses.
Tip your wait staff. And hopefully we'll see you in real life pretty soon.
That'd be great. Thank you. Good night.
Thank you. Good night.
I want to see the chats. Oh, you cut them out.
How'd that go?
That went great from my perspective. What did you think?
I thought it went pretty well.
It was awesome.
We kept the energy up, right?
Yes. The conversation, it was wonderful. I know that there have been a few website orders. I checked. There have been orders.
Good.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah, you sold your book.
I feel good about that. I feel good about that for you too.
Yeah, it's awesome.
I
Yeah.
wanted this to be a success for everybody tonight.
Yeah, it's a great story. You know, it was just fascinating. It was really fun.
Oh, good.
It is a really good book.
Yeah, I'm getting good feedback on it from people. So
Hey, Art, I hope I hit all these points. I had it on my a Word document that I lost in the middle of this, so I hope I didn't miss anything.
no, we got everything I wanted to get. Thanks.
Okay.
I did ask myself a couple of questions.
I saw that. I just tried to get out of the way because that's the point I lost it. I was like, I didn't know how to get up, you know.
Yeah, right. No, it worked great.
Okay.
All right, Jim, we're going to do 100 more of these in the next 6 months. You ready?
Anytime you want, man. Anytime you want.
No, I appreciate it.
Okay.
So,
Take care.
Thank you. Bye.
all right, bye. Thanks, Jordan. Bye.